A Sikh independence advocate who was killed 2 months ago in British Columbia is at the center of a widening diplomatic row between India and Canada.
His name is Hardeep Singh Nijjar. He was called a human rights activist by Sikh organizations and a terrorist by India's government. The Sikh separatist moved to Canada in the mid-1990s, where he worked as a plumber. He later became chief of the Khalistan Tiger Force, a group dedicated to creating an independent Sikh homeland, which would include parts of India's Punjab state. India has labeled the group a terrorist organization.
Mr. Nijjar has been wanted by Indian authorities for years, starting in 2007. That's when he was linked to a blast in Punjab that killed 6 people. More recently, in 2018, India accused him of conspiring and planning to carry out a major terrorist attack in India. In 2020, India declared Mr. Nijjar a terrorist and last year offered a reward of $12,000 for information leading to his arrest.
Fast forward to June, when he was gunned down as he was leaving the car park of the Sikh temple where he served as president in British Columbia. He suffered multiple gunshot wounds and died at the scene. He is the third prominent Sikh figure to have died unexpectedly in recent months.
Joining us for more on this now is Michael Kugelman, director of the South Asia Institute at the Wilson Centre. Michael, Prime Minister Trudeau says he's not trying to provoke India, but wants answers over the murder. Is it possible to remove the politics from the process of this murder investigation?
Well, I think that he already has provoked India. The fact that he brought out these allegations publicly so that not only the Canadian public, but the entire world could hear, that's something that clearly has provoked India. And also, the Indian government is one that is extremely sensitive to any type of external criticism about its affairs, its policies, its politics at home. And yet, here is a case of, not just some modest criticism, but you've got the Prime Minister of Canada publicly accusing quote-unquote agents of the Indian government of orchestrating this assassination. Though I do think that the point here from Trudeau is that he values the relationship with India. And I think it's an important signal he's sending, that he wants to ensure that an off-ramp is found for the tensions in their relationship and that they could find some ways to move forward despite this very severe crisis in relations.
Trudeau made these allegations in the House of Commons, but at this point, they're still just allegations. India has kicked out a Canadian diplomat. How far can India retaliate? And what do you think is Trudeau's strategy here, making such bold claims when Canada has so much to lose?
Right, absolutely. And to this point, India's reactions have been perfectly predictable. Reciprocation, essentially, kicking out a Canadian diplomat from India. This is what happens when you have these types of diplomatic spats. But I think a key signpost to watch out for in the coming days is what else might India do? Might it, for example, reduce security for Canadian diplomatic facilities in India? Might it downgrade relations with Canada? Those would be escalations, would mark a new phase in this crisis. But if India holds back from that, then I think maybe there could be a chance to walk things back from the brink. And there could be some opportunities to lower temperatures this week in New York. As you know, the annual UN General Assembly meetings are taking place, and you've got senior Indian and Canadian officials there, including Trudeau, as well as the Indian External Affairs Minister. So there could be some opportunities for some sidelines efforts to reduce tensions. Though I think, quite frankly, that the mood is so tense right now, it would be very difficult to do that. I don't think we're going to see tensions ease in the immediate future.
So what's at stake then in this growing diplomatic row in terms of trade?
Oh, a lot is at stake. Canada is a top 20 investor in India. And, Canada is a top trade destination for India. One of the main reasons why India has really strengthened its relations with Western countries and powers in recent years is in order to take advantage of major trade opportunities. And, India, there's also a very large Indian diaspora in Canada. It's not just Sikhs. And also, you've got a very large number of Indian students based in Canada. So from a people-to-people context, there's a lot that's important for this relationship from India's perspective and from Canada's perspective, in that Canada, like many of its Western allies, including the U.S., views India as a key strategic partner to cooperate with in efforts to counter China. And so I think that's another important consideration as well, which all goes to show that the incentive structure, I think, in both capitals, New Delhi and Ottawa, is very strong to try to find ways to work through this very severe crisis. But let's be clear, the relationship has reached its lowest ever point, and it's going to take a lot of time to try to patch things up.
Michael, you've described the U.S. As having to walk a diplomatic tightrope in this situation because Canada is a neighbor, an ally, but India is a key strategic partner. How much involvement do you expect to see from Washington?
Very little public involvement, very little public messaging. I mean, we have seen one or two U.S. officials publicly express concern about the allegations, but yeah, the U.S. is going to take a very cautious public stance, meaning it'll be quite subdued. But I do think there may be some scope for U.S. officials to quietly, privately engage or connect with Indian interlocutors to try to deliver a message to India that it should try to work through these issues with Canada and try to address Canada's concerns. But again, that may not be very easy to do, though we have seen in recent years the way in which the U.S. has handled delicate, sensitive issues with India, such as concerns about democratic backsliding there, is to take these issues up privately and not publicly. And I imagine we'd see something similar in this case.
So what are you looking out for then? What sort of actions or events might happen that will sort of determine where that goes from here?
Well, I think it's important to note that the U.S. and Canada and several other countries that are also grappling with this issue of Sikh activism that oftentimes is manifested as a pro-Sikh independence sentiment. These countries, the U.S., Canada, the U.K., Australia, they're all in a very major intelligence alliance called the Five Eyes Alliance. And I think Canada will be putting a lot of pressure on the countries in that alliance to take a bigger stand, a stronger stand against these India in this context. But again, it's going to be very difficult for the U.S. and other countries to do that. So what I'm going to be looking for is to see when Justin Trudeau goes before the UN General Assembly and makes his speech later this week, will he reiterate these allegations? If he does, that I think would be a very troubling escalation right there. India would not take well to that. If he doesn't say anything, I think that would be a good sign that perhaps we could see some opportunities for off-ramps to emerge.
What implications could these deteriorating ties have on Sikh families in India's Sikh majority state of Punjab? Many of them depend on millions of dollars in remittances from Canada. What impact are they going to see?
Oh, absolutely. I think this is where you have to look at the most concerning impacts. The impacts on the Sikh community in Canada, but also in India and Punjab, and also in other countries where you have large components of Sikh diasporas, including the U.S., the U.K., and Australia. I think that also visa issues could become a bigger challenge for those members of the Sikh diaspora in Canada that want to go home to visit family in India. I think that could become more problematic. But I think that one of the biggest, most delicate issues here is, these countries that have these large Sikh communities, I think they will become increasingly concerned about security risks to their residents, their citizens, and members of the Sikh community, if they believe these allegations that Trudeau has made to be true. So, a number of potential impacts across many different areas here.
All right, thank you very much for your time and your insight this morning. Michael Kugelman, there, Director of the South Asia Institute at the Wilson Center.